opposite. I guess if atheism is that, I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is that any group can behave in an inappropriate way that doesn't fully line up with what their core teachings would say they should be doing, if that makes sense. But that doesn't implicate Jesus. That doesn't implicate the Bible, I don't think. It implicates them, and it implicates their own hearts and why they're doing that. And so this is just another case of like, I would just say to you, Heather, and to anybody else, please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think it's so easy to do when it comes to religious things, when it comes to bad experiences in a religious setting, that you identify that with God. Then you think that experience, you relate that with God, and that is just not the case. It's not true. And I just think you miss the truth. That's not the correct way to perceive that situation. And so, but I think you do have valid reasons at times to think that evangelical Christians might behave in a cultish way. So, guys, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, you can go ahead, Steve. I'm still thinking.
Yeah. I mean, we all got feet of clay. We're all in different, stages of growth and our sanctification. And there's, tares in the wheat field. Jesus warns about that. But I think, I'm an evangelical. I strive to follow the Lord. And, we talked earlier, as far as cult tendencies, I don't see that in evangelicals. And there might be a few bad apples out there who kind of give it a bad name. But I think, there's a lot of godly people in evangelicalism. When you talk about evangelicalism, the kind of mirror opposite term for that would be liberalism. So that's kind of where the terminology kind of comes from. And, the liberals are, they don't really believe in the inspiration of the Bible very much and the need to evangelize. And evangelicals are kind of the opposite. So I think I would say evangelicalism is a lot closer to Christianity than the other forms. I feel good about that. And there's bad apples, but the standard should never be men. It should never be the church down the street. It should always be Christ, and our ability to do our best on this side of eternity to try to understand what He's revealed in His Word.
Yeah.
Don't look at me, look at Christ. If you look at me, there's a saying: if you any Christian, if you walk around any human being for 24 hours and you see how awful we really are at our core, right. Is bad.
And look for people that are willing to say that. Look for people that are willing to acknowledge that in their pursuit of Christ, they are doing it imperfectly, and they might have to, in the future adjust and repent, and people who are willing to acknowledge their mistakes.
It's all grace. It's all grace. Right?
So, Kelsey, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, for me
pressure,
to
if you
no,
don't.
no, no. I mean, like I agree with both of what you guys are saying, and I think even before you started talking, Jordan, I honestly feel like it depends on the person and the organization, because there's certainly some, like you said, real bad apples out there. Like the WMSCOG is not the only organization that that resembles a cult. I mean, there's so many out there, and there's so many out there even within Christianity. And I think you just based on my experience, as somebody who has left a cult and who still wants to study the Bible, still wants to have a try to have a relationship with God, is that you just for me, I try to keep an open mind and realize that I don't have to agree with one single pastor 100%. Like I can take a bit of like something that one pastor says and say, oh, that's some great insight, and then I can listen to what or read like a book written by like an apologetic and be like, okay, that's a pretty good piece of information. And then
Right.
I feel like how do I say, like my and this is so, for me, this is so cliche to say, but like I really kind of get what it means to have a personal relationship with God. like, you know, this might be a bad example. I'm not a parent, but, you know, I feel like parents, they have different relationships with their kids, right? With each kid. Right. And I think the same way kind of extends with God, is that God has different, you know, relationships with each of us, because we all need something different. And for
Right.
me, I might need something different than you, Jordan, or from you, Steven. So I feel like for me, yes, there, you know, there's bad apples out there, but for me, like, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say, okay, there's bad apples, so the entire thing is a bad apple.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep an open mind and to look for myself, because I, again, with you know, this is another thing with cults, is that they take away your independent thought, that you have to rely on someone else to tell you what is correct.
Avoid
And
independent thinking. The Jehovah's Witnesses, that must
right,
make
right, to avoid independent thinking and really rely on somebody to tell you what it's supposed to be. And so that's why, like, for me, like, I'm like, okay, people are telling me what this and this is. Let me actually look in the Bible and see what does it look like. Let me look for
Right.
myself. And I think that's important to keep or if you want to continue, in Christianity, I would suggest spending the time yourself to see what makes sense to you and what is God revealing to you.
Yeah. And I
And
think
Kelsey,
really,
go ahead, Jordan. Add a thought.
well, I was just going to say, and then I'll let you share your thought, that it's, to me, like this is almost a testable thing, because I think on the surface level, when you experience these sort of situations, whether it's in evangelicalism or, you know, whatever group, and you think, oh, this feels cultish, well, like, follow that string or whatever, follow it back to its root, and ultimately, if it's evangelicalism, what you're going to get to is Jesus and the teachings of Jesus, and you realize, oh, well, that person simply wasn't walking in line with what Jesus taught. But I think with groups like the WMSCOG, you follow that string and you follow it back, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. The reason that person is acting that way is because of what these doctrines are teaching. I mean, you look at the way the WMSCOG operates, the doctrines it has established, and the self-righteousness that it produces, the pride, the looking down on others who don't observe the law as well as you do, sort of mindset. And you will realize that, oh, wait a minute, the reason this person is acting that way is because this whole system is rooted in lies and deception, and it's not true. But I think with evangelicalism, if you want to call it that, with Christianity, if you follow the string back, you're ultimately going to get to Jesus, who I think, you know, you're going to have a much harder time with refuting and painting a picture of Jesus that he was just a liar or a deceiver or whatever you want to say about him. And so, yeah. So go ahead, Steve. What were you?
Yeah, and I would think, you know, I would even tend to call it more mainstream Christianity than evangelicalism to me. You know, that's kind of the term I would use personally. But, you know, Kelsey could probably give some good insight on that from her years in there. But the way I've always understood the culture of the Church of God, it's very different than the culture in, you know, mainstream Christianity, as I just said, where there's three things that they use to motivate people: fear, guilt, and shame. Now that's the big three. That's the stick that they always do, right, Kelsey? It's fear, shame, and guilt. You don't have that in a normal, healthy church. You know, I mean, it can be for anything, right? If you want to take a minute and expound on that, like maybe you talk to a guy in the kitchen when the cameras are on. You know how they've got cameras in the kitchens at the Zions, right? I mean, what churches do that? Normal churches don't have to have the overseer come running in 5 seconds later and say, I saw a guy and a girl talking right there. We got to separate them. We can't do anything. And I mean, I've heard unbelievable stories of that. So that whole dynamic exists in a lot of cults and different groups. The fear, shame, guilt thing. You know, I'm sure you went through it too. You know, missing graduations, missing, you know, weddings and all the things. You're going to die if you know, be destroyed if you miss one service. I mean, what a different dynamic. What do you think about that, Kelsey? But versus what you're starting to see now in regular mainstream Christian churches?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely, is night and day difference. I mean, the WMS, that's nailing it on the head. I mean, you can't even. I was telling, or I think I posted on one of Jordan's posts, was that, you know, on one hand, I can count how many services I've missed in 10 years, And that's, I mean, I think I calculated, I kept around 1,560 Sabbath day service. That's just Sabbath day services. It's not counting the feast or third day, just Sabbath day services. And because again, it's not even just a matter of missing the service, it's being late to service too.
Fear, guilt, and shame.
Yeah, because you're not going because you're thinking like, oh, this is the day that God, set aside for rest. This is the day God created for rest. You're not thinking that. You're thinking, oh my God, I got to be there so I don't go to hell. That's what it becomes. And so, but in normal Christian, I mean, I haven't been to a ton of churches since I've left, but I mean, they don't take attendance. First of all, they don't take attendance. That's a big thing. Yeah, and they're not marking who's coming in late, and even if you come in late, they're so nice and they welcome you in, and it's like
they're happy to have you.
Yeah, it's night and day. If you can't make it next week because you have to, you're going to somebody's wedding, oh, congratulations, they're getting married, So, I mean, I even saw one member, she gave birth early morning on a Saturday, and she was in the church for the evening service with that baby.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Did the baby tithe that service, by the way?
No, actually it didn't. Because they had a separate room for the babies and the kids. So I mean, this is like, I don't know how many years ago, but I don't recall.
Tell the audience about a little bit of craziness. Babies have to tithe. Oh
yeah, babies have. I think I mentioned this. The babies have to tithe in the church.
I don't know if you have. If you have, it's one of those things that I just passed over.
It's like these like little weird things. Like they just pop into my head because somebody mentions it. But yeah, that's another one of the things that babies have to tithe, even though obviously they don't work. They don't even, they can't even walk. They're not walking themselves to the church. They're like sleeping mostly through the service. So, but they're expected to tithe. And so they have their own, because like in the WMS, they have like tithing envelopes per person, and each envelope has the person's name on it. And so there's the tithing envelope for the babies. It says the baby's name on it. And when you open it up, it's like a little pamphlet, and it's recorded. The what you give each week is recorded down. And so the babies are also expected to give offerings, and they are their attendance is counted too.
What Bible verse was that from? I must have missed
it. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Must have been the lost book of Corinthians that Paul wrote or something.
Yeah.
Yes, Hezekiah. But I mean, before you join a group like this, that's kind of what I said before. It's like, you got to know what you're signing up for. It's like, okay, you're not going to get these books, of scripture for a little while here, and all the kooky little weird doctrines, and tithing babies and cameras everywhere. I mean, it's like, seriously. And then, letting the dead bury their dead. I mean, on and on and on. It's like, come on. Do your homework before you join a group. If you're going to do a lot of homework before you buy a car, I hope, the second most expensive thing after a house, right? Mm-hmm. Well, do a little bit of homework where you're going to put your soul,